Well, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. And I would like to thank you, first of all, the Mumbai Master Printer Association for inviting Toyo to participate in this event and giving us the opportunity to explain to you our vision on the sustainability from the point of view of InkMaker. So I will start sharing my screen. Yes. I think you can see the screen right now.
Yep.
Okay. So when we think about sustainability, we need to keep in mind not only the part of the packaging that we're manufacturing. Most of the time in this presentation, I will speak about packaging, but in many occasions, this can be extended to any printed materials. So when we think about sustainability, we need to think about not only on the process where we are making the packaging or the printing process, but also we need to consider all the materials that we are using from the beginning, from the moment where we design the packaging or the printed materials. And also we need to think about all the process that we are going through and also the end of life of this product. What is going to happen when this product is not used anymore? So this is some of the topics that we're going to show today. I will try to navigate to these aspects, and I will show you some proposals that Toyo Ink is offering to the customers in order to improve or in order to increase the sustainability of the packaging. Let me move this somewhere else. One moment, please. Okay. So, as I mentioned today, we're going to see several points, several aspects of the sustainability from the raw material selection, how this is affected by the trends and regulations in different parts of the world. We're going to see how to improve the manufacturing process, which materials we can use in order to reduce the environmental impact or to make the packaging more sustainable, and also thinking of the end of life of the product. So nowadays, when we think about sustainability, when we hear the sustainability, very often we hear many times the negative impact that the packaging has in our society. From our point of view of printing industry player, and more in particular for the point of view of packaging value chain, I think we have to defend the benefits of packaging. Nowadays, our society is evolving in such a way that many consumers, they have much more access to different products. And this is in a great part thanks to the packaging, thanks to the new protection and functionalities of the packaging. And the same goes for any printed materials. The culture, the information is reaching many of the consumers because of printed materials. So I think it's quite difficult to imagine a world without these printed materials and without the packaging. So we have reached a level of speciality in the packaging in the printing industry that allow us to have, for a single product, same single product, different kind of packaging, different kind of offers to the customers that offer different kind of access, different handlings, etc. And I think it's quite difficult to get back to the situation where we didn't have that situation. So historically, the printing and packaging industry has been evolving in order to respond to these market demands. And we have been improving the quality and the functionality of the products. And I think today also we are going to evolve and we're going to offer what the society requires according to these new trends of sustainability. So when we speak about sustainability, we mostly speak about three main topics. One is the environmental impact, how our industry is impacting mostly the air pollution, the emissions in terms of VOCs, carbon footprint, and hazardous materials. Another topic that, this is one example of the VOC restrictions that is, I don't know who is having a sound that is disturbing a little bit. Okay. So regarding the VOCs emissions, one of the typical examples is the recent restriction of VOCs in the Chinese government. Many factories, many industries in China has been affected by the VOC restrictions in China. And in the case of the printing industry, we have seen this year the release of the new GB regulation with the limits of the VOC compounds in the printing inks. So depending on the type of printing inks, depending on the printing method and the technology of the ink, we have different limits. And I will come back later to these values, but it's important to know that many countries, not only China, are also following the same trend, that reducing the emissions that our printing industry is releasing to the atmosphere. So another hot topic when we speak about the sustainability is where we are bringing the raw materials from. So there is a big issue about the fossil resources scarcity. So we have reached a level of consumption in the current world where we are using a lot of materials from the earth, and these materials are not renewable. So if we continue with the same rhythm of expenditure, either the oil, gas, and coal will be over in a question of a few tens of years in the 2050s, 60s, and 80s. We are forecasting that no more oil, gas, or coal will be available. So we have to find new materials. We have to find substitution materials to address this issue. And the third topic, and one of the most important, is the littering and the ocean pollution. So today's probably you have seen all of this kind of typical image of packaging products, printed products in the rivers, in the seas, mostly in Southeast Asia. And the famous Ellen MacArthur sentence of by 2050, there will be more plastic than fishes in the ocean. So having this in mind, Toyo Ink has been working for the past few years in developing more sustainable and more environmental friendly solutions. So how we can address these solutions, and these are some of the things that Toyo Ink is working on, but not only Toyo, but we have several industry players or several key players in the value chain that are working on this, from government, different kind of activities, from the point of view of companies like brand owners or big global converters, but also some private organizations. And what is more important also is the individual awareness that we need to do something, we need to change something in this industry. So regarding governments, as you may know, there are some different activities, different directions where the governments are going. And for example, in China, there are a lot of focusing on the reduction of the contaminants, of the pollutants. In Europe and America, it was traditionally stronger in terms of safety, chemical safety of the printed materials. And now what is the trend is the packaging act or the packaging pacts in order to reduce the amount of plastic that is used in the packaging industry. So most of them are following the same structure, and most of them, they have similar targets. So probably you already heard about the targets of 2025 according to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Also, most of these targets are aligned with that. One of the targets is that by 2025, 100% of the plastic packaging should be either reusable, recyclable, or compostable. And not only that, also the 70% of this plastic packaging should be effectively recycled. It's not only necessary to design the packaging in a way that can be recycled, but also 70% should be really recyclable or composted. And additional target is that for new packaging materials, at least 30% of the raw material should come from recycled elements. So it means that the new material, the new packaging should not be made only from virgin material, but should be also include some of these raw materials coming from the recycling streams. And of course, as a general target, is to take actions in order to eliminate all the problematic or unnecessary single-use packaging by redesigning innovation or using alternative models. So this is a general target for many of the different governments that are also supported by most of the biggest brand owners and converters. They have issued their own commitments, and you can see, for example, there that most of them, they are following, and they are trying to change or to innovate their packaging to make it more recyclable, to use more post-consumer recycling raw materials, and to increase the recycled rates of their packaging is the most followed trends. In that sense, also, there are many organizations, many consortiums that are working, putting together different industry players in the society, in the industry. And in our case, for example, Toyo Ink is working in different activities, but one of them is the C-Flex, which is the circular economy flexible packaging, which is mainly focused in Europe, but some of the activities, some of the trends can be extrapolated and exported to other countries. So the main idea here is that we should not remove all the plastic from the packaging. We should not eliminate many plastic because they have a lot of advantages in the current packaging industry today. But we should try to make it as much as possible recyclable. So in order to reuse again this plastic, either for same usage in the future, again for packaging, or for other usage. So this is some of the activities that Toyo Ink is working in. But of course, one of the most important things is to educate the consumers. As much as we make the packaging and the printed materials recyclable or sustainable, it doesn't mean anything if the end consumer is not treating or not handling the packaging properly. So if we make the packaging able to be recycled, the consumer also should be educated, should be given the possibility of recycle that packaging, to put in a right way, to be collected and to be reused later. So in that sense, Toyo Ink has developed some materials in order to reduce this environmental impact. We have been working in the past few years in different directions. One of them is the reduction of the gases emitted to the atmosphere during the manufacturing of the inks and also during the printing process of the ink. So we have been working on the VOC-free or low VOC inks, depending on the materials, but also for flexible packaging, the water-based gravular inks, water-based flexo inks, and also the high-performance water-based inks. In terms of energy saving, and this is mostly, it's not written here, but in terms of energy saving, we were developing mostly the change from the conventional offset inks into UV inks, and then from UV inks into the high sensitivity UV inks or LED inks in order to save energy during the printing process. But also in order to improve the recyclability and to reduce the consumption of fossil materials, we are working on the de-inking systems, the delamination anchor coatings for separating different types of plastics before recycling, and also the biomass inks and adhesives. So, for example, in the case of the VOC, as I mentioned before, in China there is the new regulations. And we have to be careful there because the VOC definitions depends on the location where we are working. So for example, in Japan, the VOC regulation, the VOC definition, the definition of VOC-free inks is the inks that contains less than 1% of petroleum-based solvents. But in case of China, any material or any substance which the boiling point is lower than 250 degrees Celsius considered a VOC. So in this case, for example, we can have the case that some ink is not VOC, I mean, it's VOC free in Japan, but not, it might not be VOC free in China. And here we have the case, for example, if we think about this, for example, maybe this Flexo ink in China to be VOC free in Japan, it is enough to have less than 1% of solvent, but in China it should commit to this condition. And we have the case, for example, that you may think UV inks for offset are VOC free because they don't have solvent. But if they have any material that which the boiling point is less than 250 degrees, these are also considered VOCs components in China. And we have the case of some monomers which are included in the UV inks that if we don't control them properly, they can be evaporated under in a temperature under 250 degrees. So they are considered as VOC inks, not VOC free inks. So we have to be careful with the definitions, and we have to be careful where we sell the inks or where we use the inks. So another way to reduce also the emissions to the atmosphere is to reduce the carbon footprint, to reduce the CO2 emissions during the production of the inks and also during the printing process. And in this case, we are suggesting customers to change, for example, the printing process from solvent-based gravure ink into water-based Flexo inks. In that case, as you can see here in this graph, if we change from solvent-based gravure ink into water-based Flexo inks, the VOC's emissions can be reduced by 85%, and also the CO2 emissions can be reduced by 44%. So it's quite a big change. We're considering only the printing process. So it's something to have in mind when the customer or when the final user is looking for more sustainable or more environmentally friendly products. Another thing is how we can reduce the dependence on fossil resources. In our case, we are suggesting, and we are already selling in Japan, the biomass-based inks. So we have inks that where we substitute part of the fossil resin into the ink via biomass materials, biomass resin. So depending on the amount of this biomass contained in the ink, the ink can be labeled as 10, 20, 30, 40%, etc. And these are the inks that we are developing. We have inks in that case for all the printing processes, like offset, gravure, flexo, for surface, for reverse printing, etc. And also we have now the lamination adhesives for that contains biomass material in order to reduce the consumption of fossil resources. But also, another way to reduce the dependence on fossil resources is to reduce the amount of plastic that we use in the packaging. So in that sense, we are developing and we are proposing gas barrier coatings in order to reduce the number of layers in the flexible packaging. Instead of, for example, the metallized polymer film, we can use a barrier coating in order to reduce the oxygen or the water vapor transmission through the packaging. Another solution is to offer UV blocking coatings or infrared blocking coatings that protect the packaging with less amount of plastic in the final packaging. And also high gloss varnishes for the surface, also in order to reduce the external layer that gives the high gloss to the packaging. And when we speak about paper, because now some of the brand owners are looking for moving from plastic packaging into paper packaging, we need to protect also the paper packaging from the food which is contained inside. In this case, can be water or oily food. So normally this kind of packaging is, this kind of paper or cardboard is laminated either with wax or with polyolefin film. So in order to make this 100% recyclable and get rid of the mix of paper and film, we are offering water and grease barrier coatings and also heat sealing lacquers in order to be able to heat seal this kind of packaging without using the typical polyethylene film. On the other side, when we think about the end of the life of the packaging, we need to think, the packaging or any other printed material, we need to think what is going to be, how is going to be this end of life. So it's very important to understand and to differentiate the three concepts of recyclability, biodegradability, and compostability. Probably most of you already know, but recyclability is to recover or generate the raw materials in order to make again high added value products with the same materials. While biodegradability is allowing the natural elements to decompose the materials into materials that are normally non-harmful for the environmental. And this is normal and natural decomposition. But on the other side, we have composting, which is similar to biodegradability, but is with a specific environment. So we have a specific setting of temperature and humidity, and this is much faster than the natural biodegradability. And another differentiation is that the compost result should be able to be used normally for agricultural usage, like because they are nutrient rich, they should not contain any material that can endanger the health of plants or other material that we may mix with the composting result. So having this in mind, we have to think that the printing inks usually are not biodegradable. When we speak about making a biodegradable packaging, which is also some of the topics nowadays, the inks itself are not biodegradable. And the main reason for that is that the pigments that we contain in the inks are inorganic pigments, and they are not biodegradable, so they are remaining like this. But what we can do is we can certify the full packaging as biodegradable. And there is a standard in Europe, which is this 13432, that says that the packaging as a whole can be identified as biodegradable if we meet some requirements. And the requirements mostly are that it has to comply with the heavy metal contains. It should not contain heavy metals or halogens like fluorine within the specific limits. This is one of the conditions. And the other condition is how we select the inks in order to make them, the packaging biodegradable. And there we have two options. One option is to change all the components of the ink to make them biodegradable. And here in this graph, you can see more or less the typical composition of the ink, where we have 50% of the ink is made of binder, which is a resin, typically. Then we have some waxes, additives, and then pigments. I told you before that the pigments are not biodegradable. So we can change these pigments into biodegradable pigments, like organic pigments, but we will never get the same color strength, the never light fastness, the same printing properties as current pigments. So it's quite difficult to make ink that is that will have the same performance as current inks and thereby degrading. So the other option is to use inks which are not certified as biodegradable, but we can use them with a certain amount, limit amount. So if every single ink represents less than 1% of the weight of the packaging, and the total amount of the inks is less than 5% of the weight of the packaging, it's considered that this will not affect the biodegrading process. And if the material, the substrate is biodegradable, the final packaging is highly probably be biodegradable also by itself. So for example, if we use 50 grams of biodegradable film and we want to print 1 gram per square meter of one ink, this will not comply with the conditions of the biodegradability, because this one single ink represents more than 2%, and the limit was 1%. But if we only cover half of the packaging, the ink already is compliant because it remains below 1%. Another solution is to change, instead of having one solid print of one color. If we print, like for example, process print, we have 4 colors, and every single color in the total amount of the weight will represent only 0.5%, and the total amount of the 4 colors will be 2%, which is within the conditions of the biodegradability of the packaging. Of course, the whole packaging has to be assessed and tested to show that the biodegradability, but this is the first step to offer the biodegradability on packaging. And this not only applies for film, but also for paper. And what is more important and what is the trend in Europe is to focus on the circular economy. Some brand owners are, of course, requesting biodegradable or compostable packaging, but this is kind of promoting or incentivizing the consumer to throw the packaging anywhere, because if they consider that it's biodegradable, they can put it anywhere. They don't need to handle it properly. So the main trend in Europe now is to focus on the circular economy. Circular economy is based on the usage of the same material several times in order to minimize the raw material consumption, and in order to minimize also the disposal in the landfill or the incineration of the materials. So as much as possible, if we can keep in the materials in the loop, and as I mentioned before, it doesn't mean that the current packaging has to be a packaging in the future life, but can be another high added value plastic or paper product. This will be already part of the circular economy. So in that sense, there are several types of recycling when we speak about recyclability. For example, you may think in Japan is a society with high rates of recyclability, but actually in Japan, the most important recyclability stream is the thermal recycling. So this means that most of the plastic packaging is burned and used to generate energy, but is not efficiently recycled into plastic again. Only the PET bottles are the most recycled materials again into plastic products. So in Europe, the most important focus nowadays is the mechanical recycling. Why? Because these are the facilities that are already available, and is cost performance is the stream that is more likely to be successful in the future. But this has some restrictions. So for example, multi-material structures, mixing of different kind of plastics or paper with plastic cannot be used in the mechanical recycling. So it should be as much as pure as possible at the beginning. And the other solution will be the chemical recycling, which is breaking down the plastic into these original components, polymers, monomers. But this, even there is some technology available and some lab test has been done, it's very difficult to put into the practice in the industrial scale, because it's quite expensive, and there is no facilities right now available to handle all the packaging that is in the market. So in Europe, the focus is in the mechanical recycling. And for that, Toyo Ink also is offering materials, offering products, solutions in order to increase this mechanical recyclability. One of the solutions is the PVC-free inks. One of the requests that we had recently is that in order to improve the mechanical recyclability, the mechanical recycling of the flexible packaging, for example, is that the PVC should be free of ink. The ink should be free of PVC, because the PVC can liberate the chlorine in the atoms, and this will rust, will damage the mechanical recycling facilities. So some brand owners are already requesting the PVC-free inks. Another solution is the anchor coating for delamination, or the de-inking anchor coatings, which they allow us to remove the ink from the printed plastic, so we can send the plastic free of inks and free of lamination adhesives for the recycling process, so we can get a high degree of purity in the recycling process. And also the biomass inks, the advantage is that they don't generate extra CO2, they don't generate extra carbon footprint compared to the conventional inks. So these are some solutions that Toyo Ink is working on. But what is important is the design for recyclability. When we need to think about new packaging, new products, new printed product also, we need to think, it's very important to think about the final stage of the packaging. So of course, we have to keep in mind the compliance with the regulations, the migration limits, safety of chemicals, etc. Of course, we have to keep in mind the performance of the printed material and the packaging, the physical performance, etc. But we should think about the ultimate recycling process suitability. And for that, there are some guidelines that are being issued. There are different kind of guidelines, and they are not mandatory, they are suggested. But some of them, for example, in the plastic packaging, is to try to make the packaging monomaterial, either polyethylene or polypropylene, or combination of polyethylene, polypropylene, which is all the same family of polyolefins, or just PET, like in the case of PET bottles, to make also the label in the same material so it can be easily recycled. Avoid carbon black fillers and in the pigments if possible. This is just for the sorting capacity, for the sorting systems that are available right now. Another thing is to avoid this paper plastic combination, which I was speaking about before, because this reduces the quality of the recyclability of the paper and the plastic. Avoid materials like PVC. And there are some other guidelines, but this is the most important things. In terms of paper and carton, one of the last trends also is to make possible of course, the de-inking and the repulping in order to recycle in a better way the material. So, of course, mineral oil-free inks are required, and inks that are easily removable from the paper, even from the pulp level, in order to make again a new pure paper from the raw materials itself. So this is a very short and quick travel about the sustainability solutions that Toyo Ink is proposing. So I think with this I will finish this presentation, and if you have any question or any comment, also my colleagues in India are online also, so they can also help us solving any question. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jose Novo. That was very insightful, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who would appreciate what you have said. Moving along, I request Mr. Fahim Akbotwala to take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. It was a lovely presentation. I just had one question for you about the reduction of virgin in plastic. Is that the case with paper also? Are you looking at reduction of virgin paperboard also?
Yes, actually, we have some requests from big brand owners and fast food brand owners requesting that the inks or the coatings that we put should be easily de-inked, or what we call the repulpable. So whatever printed with inks or coatings should be easily, how can I say, should be easily taken off from the material in order to repulp it and to recycle. So the final target is to reuse again this paper and to make again new packaging or new products.
Fahim, just before you start, I think Tushar also has a question. Tushar, if you are hearing, kindly go ahead with your question to Mr. Jose.
Good evening, Mr. Jose.
Good evening.
few years ago, I was talking to another ink company, and they had said that some of the international MNCs, one particular one, had mandated that by 2022, they were to do away with totally with metallized polyester packaging, MET-PET packaging as it is popularly known. And they were mandated to develop inks or coatings which could give a similar look and eliminate MET-PET totally. Would you be aware if there has been any progress towards that?
Your question is if there are inks already for that?
Inks or coatings.
Yeah. I mean, one of the main targets of the metallized films in the flexible packaging is the barrier properties, is to avoid oxygen or water humidity to come out or in of the packaging. So in that sense, for that, there were some developments of barrier coatings to give the same functionality. Another usage of the metallized layers, either in flexible or even in paper packaging, is to give this shiny effect, this luxury or reflective effect. And for that, we, in Toyo Ink, we have developed some materials, some inks that are metallic inks to reproduce the same level of gloss, the same level of shiny, of similar to cold foil or to hot stamping. But this requires a specific application methods. It requires a specific calendar roll after the printing in order to make pressure and heat to the surface of the ink in order to increase the leveling. And the main purpose of this is to save most of the material which is wasted during the cold stamping, in the cold foil. You have a lot of material which is not used because you are only stamping one part of the packaging. So in that sense, we have the material for the offset printing. And for the flexible, as I mentioned before, to substitute the barrier given by the metallized layer, we have also some materials. But of course, you will never get the same performance with coatings as you get with the aluminum layer or vacuum metallized films.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Jose Novo, I think you have one more question. Amit Shah, you have a question. You want to go ahead quickly? We're running out of time. Amit, are you there?
I can read the question on the
Can you
chat.
please ask your question quickly?
My
to Mr.
question is
Jose
that
Novo?
how somebody will decide that this is less than 1% or 2%. It's very difficult to measure the ink percentage when the print is done.
Yeah, actually what you have to do is weight the packaging without printing and the packaging with print, and you can see the difference. Another way, we have materials, we have equipment in our labs to check exactly the coating amount that is printed. So normally in this case, when you need to, I guess your question is regarding the biodegradability and the compostability compliance. Normally when you have this, when you have to demonstrate or you have to show the compliance, you have to send this packaging to the specialized labs for the analyze. So they will weigh exactly with microscope and with other devices, the exact amount of ink and the exact amount of substrate that is used there. So you can easily calculate or work out how much percentage is the ink, how much percentage is the adhesive, etc.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Fahim, over to you, please.
All right. So thank you, Jose. Thank you very much for that lovely presentation. Before we end, I'd like to propose the vote of thanks. First of all, I want to thank our sponsors,